One of the things that I've experienced in being involved in operations and maintenance is hearing this statement that the great thing about solar PV is it's maintenance free. Now, I have 60 people spread across the country who would be absolutely devastated to hear that statement, because they spend every single waking hour and working hour maintaining the solar PV that we have installed all around the country. What I want to talk about today is how you go about choosing the right operations and maintenance package and what it is that drives the performance of an operations and maintenance organisation. So the first one of those points, choosing the right O&M package, but it actually depends on who you are as the buyer and what it is that you therefore want to try and buy. Operations and maintenance is seen as being a single homogeneous product. People often ask me, how much does O&M cost? It's like asking how much is a car. There's an awful lot of variation within the services that are delivered, the content, the type, the quality of the service that gets delivered. So understanding what that best package is means actually understanding really your model, your investor's model, and the nature of the portfolio that you hold as a customer. Starting with the investor profile, the profile of the underlying investors, how much risk in the operation stage the investor is prepared to take. Does the investor simply want to transfer the entire risk of any underperformance of the asset to somebody else and let them deal with the problem? Now, clearly, if they do that, and therefore they want the operations and maintenance provider to provide a PR guarantee, the next question becomes, well, what level of guarantee? Do you want me to guarantee the entire as designed performance of the system, that amount less something? If I do provide that guarantee, then what level of liquidated damages, at what rate of liquidated damages, would you like us as an O&M provider to take on? One of the things that we see in other markets like Italy and Spain is where tariff rates were very high, the O&M prices were astronomical. There, I've seen prices of €50,000 per megawatt in Italy, which is a fantastic price. And the reason for that was the tariff levels were so high that people just didn't care or didn't understand the cost of delivering those services. We've seen O&M prices in the UK that have been in excess of £15,000. I've seen O&M providers in the UK paying 10 times the price of grass cutting to landlords because when they first moved into this area, they had no understanding of what the price of the things were and they were being driven by the tariff. So the view is that prices should come down because tariffs have come down, and that's generally right. But when you start looking at damages, if you want your O&M provider to match the damages that you're suffering through any loss, then those damages are going to be driven by the tariff rate that you have plugged your plant in on. So the level of damages and the point at which the minimum guarantee will occur. So actually, how deep do I have to go in those damages? So transferal of risk and the nature of that risk transferal has a significant impact on exactly what O&M package you should go for. It then moves into actually who the buyer is, whether the buyer is directly an investor, whether they're an asset manager, or whether they're an EPC operating the plant on behalf of somebody else. The role that they're playing then determines the type and nature of the service that they will take and the role that they play. Some investors want to be complete outsourcers and just have somebody else do it. Some want to control some level of capability themselves and be just subcontracting services to certain providers. Others want to build in their own in-house specialism and still more actually, like Lightsource in its choice, want to be a vertically integrated player with its own maintenance delivery capability and all the way through the system. The choice of operating model that you have, given your investor's background, is also then driven itself by the characteristics of the portfolio you have. If you have a very condensed geographic portfolio with the same systems on it, then you may decide to hire your own maintenance people. If you have 3 systems spread across the country, hiring your own maintenance people and expecting to get full PR guarantees is unlikely to match your cost expectations. So finding that balance and understanding how the portfolio that you have impacts the business model that you have and relates to the investment risk that you're taking are the things that will drive your decision about actually what O&M package you're asking people for. Now, the shape of what some of those packages look like, There's a number of different characteristics of what gets delivered through O&M, but it's the monitoring of the plant, the reporting of the plant's performance, conducting the preventative maintenance, ground maintenance cleaning, surveillance services, again a major piece. This can be a significant cost to the operation and maintenance services of the plant. Is this or is this not included in the package and the price that you're talking about? Corrective maintenance, performance guarantees at what level, as I discussed earlier. Degradation management, actually how active do you want to be about monitoring the performance of the panels? You can do thermographic checks on all of your panels every year. You can do significant amounts of IV curve testing to understand whether or not the plant is degrading at the rate you expected it to, and therefore be very actively managing your warranty claims. Or you can just manage at the top level of your PR performance, and only if you start seeing exceptions and deviations from what your investment case said you were going to get, do you start digging in and being specific about what you want. But the more cautious you want to be, as in most things in life, the more you will pay for somebody else to take that risk and manage things on your behalf. There's then what I've just described as normal O&M, which excludes those last two things, the last point, environmental management, links back to the conversation we heard earlier. We all know getting things through planning is harder. We all know that we promise the earth, or promise not to damage the earth, by getting, in order to get our plants through planning. All of those things that get promised at that stage have to be delivered by somebody. Are you asking your O&M provider to conduct the twice annual ecological studies? Are you asking them to maintain the new planting that's been done? We have plants where we have spent 6 figures on new planting for the plants, and I don't think that's particularly unusual. Maintaining that planting comes at a significant cost, particularly in the early years until it becomes established. So these things that we're having to do in development have knock-on costs into O&M and require specialisms and knowledge to manage them. It's not just going out, putting a few matchboxes down and counting how many dead beetles are in there the next morning. So that part of the service, the full service of handing everything over to an O&M provider. O&M is for me, is something that provides that performance guarantee, actually underwrites for the investor their losses and provides liquidated damages at the agreed level. There's then what is a full maintenance service. So actually a lot of, whether they be asset managers, whether they be EPCs, wish to manage the asset themselves, wish to take the risk of underperformance themselves, but want to have the on the ground boots that will provide the actual maintenance services to the plant, delivered against either response time or perhaps availability guarantees. So that kind of maintenance service, instructed and directed on a day-to-day basis by the asset manager, EPC or owner. And the last one is just pure preventative maintenance, and this tends to, as systems get smaller, paying, if you have 1 or 2 small systems, you may choose actually not to push any risk or very minimal risk onto your O&M provider, simply to have a preventative maintenance package. And this sometimes is more common in rooftops. It's also more common in jurisdictions like Germany, where investors have got a little bit more comfortable with the risk that they're taking with a solar asset and the construction and the performance of a solar asset. So I'll just buy a preventative maintenance service and I'll call off on a pay-as-you-go basis any correctives that I need. And therefore, as an asset owner, I'm taking all of the risk of underperformance myself, but I've got myself comfortable with that because I understand the asset class, I understand the construction, perhaps the asset has been there for a while, and I've seen how well it performs. So these are the different package considerations that operators and owners have to make when looking at buying O&M services. What drives the performance of an O&M provider? Well, it's a range of things, and it starts from just actually the ability to know that something has gone wrong. If you can't detect a problem, you can't respond to it. So having a monitoring system and having people that are constantly monitoring the plants and understand what it is they're looking at is the first step in being able to respond quickly. Interpretation of a fault is a key skill. It's not simply a question, if you've ever tried monitoring a solar plant, of an alarm going off telling you to go fix it. I was standing yesterday talking to somebody and they had a wonderful monitoring system that showed them that one of the 500 inverters on their plant was performing at a lower PR than all the others. Now, that's useful information, but what do? Do I put a guy in a van and send him out to go and fix it? Or do I find out that actually that inverter is running off the strings in the corner of the field where the trees grow highest. And the irradiance sensor is on the other side of the park, and therefore it's not comparing light with light when it's making that decision. And it's 10 o'clock in the morning, so the shadows are long, it's still April. So this ability to interpret what's going on is critical. When you then decide to call somebody out, you have to consider the proximity of the person you're calling out. They need to be close to your plant. If they're not close to the plant, they're going to take a long time to get there. But don't confuse proximity with responsiveness. Just because somebody's close by doesn't mean they're going to go rushing out when you phone them. If it's a subcontractor with whom you do a little bit of business every year or sometime during the year when there's something wrong with your plant, then, do you know what, they may decide to carry on doing what they were doing and go tomorrow because you're not financially important to them. So proximity and responsiveness are not the same thing. The ability to get people to prioritise your requirements based on your need, and not just, it's me phoning, please go and do it, but it's a 30 kilowatt string inverter down, let's be sensible about when we are and what price we're going to pay for you to go out, versus I've got the entire plant down. Now, repair times are the next point, which it's okay to get somebody there, but if the person that you send there can't solve 95% of the problems that you have on the plant, all they're going to do is diagnose the problem and call somebody else in. I'm aware of organisations that employ people because they have very tight response time targets. They employ people to turn up on the plant to hit the button and say, we responded within the time that we said that we would respond. I can't fix anything, but I'm here. That's no use. So multi-skilled people who are able to deal with low voltage, high voltage comms networks are the kind of things that you need, who are specialists in solar. One of the things that Lightsource has done since its inception in hiring people into the organisation is, as far as possible, try to find the right people and then give them the skills to do the things that we need to do. My exposure to solar before I joined Lightsource when we started it was the little thing on my calculator and the ability to add up. That was it. Now, what we've done since then is try to find people with the right approach and the right aptitude. Now, as Jonathan said earlier, 4.3 gigawatts of solar now installed in the UK. 2011, there was none. Won't surprise anybody, therefore, that there is not a massive number of PV skilled O&M technicians out in the field today. Lightsource's approach is that we hire skilled electricians with the right attitude to getting the job done, and we give them the PV skills to be able to manage the plants. It's still electricity. It's DC, but it's still electricity. So finding the right people and giving them the right skills, giving them the right tools to do their job, supporting them with the right second line, so as then, if they can't, and the 5% of problems they can't solve themselves, they've got people they can phone who are deep technical specialists in the different areas of the business, the different areas of the plant, to support them through remotely, or if necessary, go out and attend, is essential to actually being able to repair things. Having the right spares available, either on site or centrally, regionally located, allows the people to respond. And importantly, having access to the right spares network. Electrical wholesalers are dotted across the country. Many of the components that are in solar plants are non-solar specific. We all understand the modules, the inverters, the combiner boxes, but beyond that, most of these components are standard electrical components. But being able to find them, finding the right wholesalers who are close by, who you have a relationship with, because they don't all hold the same ranges and everything else, having that support network that means you can find the right stuff that you're not carrying on stock is essential to being able to respond quickly and derive performance. And having relationships with the major equipment suppliers, so when it is a major equipment down, how do you make sure that they will respond to you and provide you with that tertiary support that you need if your own specialists can't assist and solve the problem? Now, a lot of that is about reacting. It drives availability. The other part is actually, well, do you know what? It's best if the stuff doesn't fail in the first place. Now, that's partly driven by preventative maintenance schedules. One of the things that can drive cost very heavily is the requirements of investors and owners for preventative maintenance, and sometimes a mismatch between those requirements and what actually will make sure the plant performs. I've seen examples of people asking us, for example, to inspect the fence on a monthly basis. Now, the fence is a pretty important part of the solar farm, okay? But if you want me to inspect the fence on a monthly basis, the fence around a 30, 40 megawatt solar park is about 5 miles. So if you want me to inspect that fence once a month, I could spend an awful lot of time wandering around looking and making sure the fence is there. And actually, what's the purpose of a fence? Most of our fences on Lightsource sites are deer fence. That's a good thing from a planning perspective, but a deer fence will take around about 10 seconds with a pair of nail scissors to get through it. So it's not there to provide security. That's what the cameras are for. So do you really want me to be spending an awful lot of my time inspecting the fence and charging you for it? Or would you rather we tailor the preventative maintenance package to the things that actually matter on the solar farm? So doing the physical inspection, doing that in a way that actually is matched to the requirements of the owner and the performance of the plant, doing non-invasive maintenance. We sometimes get dismissive of the idea that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But in the aerospace industry, they spent years working out, actually, don't touch it. Understand how to condition monitor it, but don't touch it. Use equipment that means you can inspect things in a non-invasive way. Don't go dismantling things and checking whether nuts and bolts are tight. Use thermal cameras to check whether or not you have heat loss and find problems ahead of time. Driving up performance is often said you can't improve the performance of a plant. It is what it is once you've built it. I don't believe that's true. I also don't believe some of the things that there's 5 or 10% of performance that can be wrung out of every single plant. But going around and rigorously and thoroughly checking the performance of each component of a plant against its peers is vitally important. Solar is not, sad to say for the real engineers in the room, actually on a technical scale, it's not that complicated. The complication in solar is the sheer scale of what we're trying to do. One string of 20 panels bolted into a combiner box, bolted into an inverter, bolted into a switch and a transformer and a switch. This technology is understood. But doing that in a field with 140,000 panels and making sure all of them are performing optimally is a massive challenge that requires data analytics and skill to interpret the results and determine that actually this inverter and that inverter should be performing the same, but they're not. Being able to compare the performance of an inverter on one field with one on the other side of the country and looking at its conversion ratio from the same manufacturer saying, well, hang on a minute, I'm losing something here. So there is a performance opportunity to be wrung out of plants by simply rigorously and relentlessly working your way through the plants and finding underperformance, not just thinking that O&M is about availability and just responding and reacting when something gets broke. Okay. The last bit of this, which is less directly related to the immediate output and performance, is just making sure you're complying with the things that you need to do. The health and safety, as we'll talk about in a minute. The requirements on a plant are, these are dangerous environments. Having the right approach to managing health and safety, understanding what the risks are, and not falling into the trap of, cover your arse health and safety, but actually keeping people safe is vitally important. When I do site inductions, I tell people on sites, I tell people 2 things. I tell them, you're in a field. You've been in fields before. Behave as you would if you were in a field on your own at the weekend. The second thing about the field that you're in is it's full of electrical stuff. Don't touch it. That's all you have to tell people. You don't have to spend. I've seen site induction packs that take 15 minutes to explain to people what's going on the solar farm. Keep it focused on what it is people need to know and make sure that permeates through the organisation that you have. Take the balance of making sure that your engineers who are driven, because engineers are, to make sure things work, things are fixed quickly, are very clear that any kind of taking a risk with their health and safety or that of others will lead to the sky falling in on them. When I first got involved in all of this, I understood ground maintenance to mean turning up with a lawnmower 3 times a year and cutting the grass. Dealing with people like Jonathan and others has educated me hugely in that regard. The task that is involved in compliantly managing your land is enormous. So Lightsource is now responsible for around 8,000 or 9,000 acres of the UK countryside. If that was a farm, it would be one of the largest farms in the UK. The largest farm in the UK was around about 18,000 acres. But most farms in the UK are 450, 500 acres. Managing that land effectively, just compliantly, with all of the wildflower meadows, biodiversity tests, drainage, we talked earlier, we saw earlier, grade 3 land, grade 3B land. Grade 3B land is grade 3B land for a reason. Okay? It has problems related to it. It will have drainage, it will have rocks, it will have all sorts of things that have to be managed. And a part of the requirement of an O&M provider, part of that contract, which unless your O&M provider understands what they're doing with it, they will get very distracted with dealing with that and then not be managing the plant effectively. So, Lightsource, what we've tried to do in building our own capability is address all of those points. We've built a capability where we now have nearly 40 engineers, directly employed engineers spread across the country. We've taken our experience and knowledge and turned that into a propositional flexibility, recognising there are different people in the marketplace who want to buy a different level of service with a different level of performance guarantee. It's a very strong and deliberate approach that we employ directly almost everyone that's involved in maintaining solar farms for us, so as then we have them locally, we have them responsive, they have the skills, the equipment, the training, the experience of dealing purely with solar farms to be able to make sure that they deliver high quality service, and they're backed up by a whole team of specialists who only do O&M, purely dedicated to O&M and separated from the rest of the Lightsource organisation to make sure that we can deliver for ourselves and for our other clients the kind of performance that they require from their plants. Thank you.
Where do our responsibilities lie in relation to that? I mean, should we be, in circumstances like that, thinking that we're going to have a lot more security around the site to prevent people getting in, and physical presence and all the rest of it? Or, you know, where does one's responsibilities lie in relation to a wider public?
I would take the comparison of the DNOs. So the DNO, in terms of their live electricity, they're all over the place. Their access points are everywhere, so they don't have manned security on them. They've taken strong measures to make sure that people have to go to a very, very deliberate effort to break in, to get into a transformer. But you'll find some high voltage equipment around that is a GRP with a lock on it. So if somebody that's operated by a DNO, if they want to put a crowbar in, they can, but it's appropriately signed. And yes, occasionally DNOs open doors and find people hanging on to buzz bars that they've tried to take. But all you can do is take enough steps to protect and label what it is that's inside there.